So Pat, here we are at the stage one of the Santos Tour Down Under for 2012. Really exciting, and we've got a stage that starts here in Prospect next to the Town Hall, makes its way up to Jepps Cross. The riders will be under race neutral, and then they start the 149 kilometre stage, pretty much heading north to Clare.
We've never finished in Clare. We've had a start at Clare 2 years ago. Now, looking at the profile of the stage, doesn't look overly difficult on paper. The stage can go two ways. If it's a hot northeasterly, which can happen in January, then it's going to be a very long day in the saddle for the riders.
Absolutely.
I predict an old-fashioned aggressive start to the tour, and yeah, Team USA will, as always, be on the attack from day one.
By the time they get to Clare, they've climbed over 400 metres. Very slow over that distance, but they're actually up, and they'll actually go to a maximum of around 450 metres above sea level up there, and then they'll actually be going downhill heading in towards Clare, and the last couple of kilometres I imagine that it will be a bunch finish if the wind hasn't had a lot to play, and I'm sure again the sprinters will be well out there doing their best to win the first stage of the Santos Tour Down Under.
As the peloton leaves from Adelaide, they'll have a cross headwind, a lot of crosswind as well, and on these flat roads, as we can see, these are perfect conditions to blow the peloton up into smaller groups. And I think, as we can see, as the grain is almost blowing flat, on a day like today there will not be a bunch sprint.
Really, they're dangerous conditions for riders to have to ride in a echelon formation where they're in a crosswind. It's probably about as bad as it gets. Okay, Pat, so here we are in Kapunda, sprint number one. So just coming up over the hill, they'll be sprinting the last few hundred metres to just past the council offices there. What will the riders be feeling at the stage?
You know, they'll be racing hard from the gun, especially if there are crosswinds. What we predict, the first Jayco sprint of the Tour Down Under is uphill. They won't be in the biggest gear for that. And straight after the sprint, the hydration station's just up the road.
Wait. You're not talking about that hydration station back there. So what we're talking about here, of course, is the hydration station where the riders get some food, they get some fluids. If a cyclist loses a couple of percent by way of body weight through lack of hydration, so through sweating and not replacing that, where cyclists don't get those bottles of water in and those electrolytes in, that can already start to affect performance. And if they then go downhill from there, the performance can really be affected up to 20 to 30% at the end of a race, and particularly in hot conditions.
It's no use to drink all this at once. It's all about drinking just little bits, probably a mouthful every 5 minutes, drink a mouthful or so, and then you'd go through one of these full biddens every 25 minutes. A lot of riders towards the end of the race will be dehydrated, but then they have the evening to rehydrate themselves, but not at the pub.
Not at the pub, right, got that. Now some tips for people who'd like to come up and see the sprint at Kapunda. So the riders, as you'll know, come up the Northern Expressway. So see the start at Prospect and then come up Main North Road and make your way through to Kapunda as quickly as you can. Set yourself up here for the sprint in the main street, and as soon as the riders have left here, you'll make your way up to Clare, but of course not following the same track that the riders followed. So Pat, they've rehydrated at Kapunda. Then there's about 10 kilometres until Taylor's Run, the Category 3 first Skoda King of the Mountain.
It's quite a long but easy climb, but then after that it's all relatively undulating run in to Clare.
That's right, Pat. Yeah, we've got another sprint at Riverton, heading up in towards Seven Hills and then, of course, into Clare. Having done this last stage, we can see that the last kilometre or two is relatively flat until you actually get to about 500 metres out, when there's an average 3% downhill gradient. So the riders are really going to reach some kind of speed heading into the finish line here at the showgrounds in Clare.
You know, the riders, the sprinters could well reach speeds over 70 kilometres per hour on this downhill run into the finish, and you may well be putting on a 55 for this downhill run into Clare.
So for spectators, Pat, they really want to get here as quickly as they can. The spectators line up because it will be a very, very fast finish here at the first stage of the 2012 Santos Tour Down Under.